Now let's hear from veteran Democrat operative James Carville. He's got his crystal ball out and he's making some bold predictions.
A Democrat is going to be elected in 2028. You know that. I know that. He's going to be a Democratic House. He's going to be a Democratic Senator. The Democratic president is going to announce a special transition advisory committee on the reform of the Supreme Court, that we could have our third branch of government has lost the faith and trust of the American people, that the number of Supreme Court justices go from 9 to 13. That's going to happen, people. That's going to happen to you. They're going to win. They're going to do some blue ribbon panel of distinguished jurists, and they are going to recommend 13, and a Democratic Senate and House is going to pass it, and the Democratic president is going to sign it, because they have to do an intervention so we can have a Supreme Court that the American people trust again.
And by American people, he of course means those who vote Democrat only, Josh. How seriously do you take those predictions? I know he still has the respect of a lot of people. A lot of people see him as actually a sensible, old-school Democrat compared to the radical new ones. But are they serious about these so-called reforms to the Supreme Court?
Rita, my first question is, what is the Raging Cajun smoking? I mean, what kind of goods does he have there stashed in his house down in Louisiana that would lead him to confidently make this pronunciation? I mean, frankly, if I were an ambitious local prosecutor, I would consider that video probable cause to launch a drug raid. I mean, I'm very curious what kind of goods he has stashed in the house that would lead him to say these crazy things there. But Jimmy Carville is basically the left-wing equivalent of Bill Kristol here in the U.S. I mean, Bill Kristol, to be clear, is now left-wing. He said he voted for Mamdani in New York City. Guy is totally out to lunch. But Carville, my point, Reed, is that this guy was actually sensible once upon a time. I mean, he was the brains of the 1992 winning Bill Clinton presidential campaign. He was the whole "it's the economy, stupid" guy there. He was the whole guy that devised the entire brilliant strategy. Not one that I would support if I were old enough to have opinions, but the strategy to essentially defeat George H.W. Bush on the whole read my lips, no new taxes thing. So he was actually a very clever political strategist, focused once upon a time on bread and butter issues like crime, the economy. And now he's just saying utterly far left garbage like this. He has no idea what he's talking about. No, Democrats are not going to pack the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. It's literally it's not going to happen. But having said that, the fact that someone who once upon a time was viewed as a centrist, reasonable, moderate figure is looking in the camera and is saying this confidently because of whatever he's currently on. He is making these pronunciations confidently. That should nonetheless, I think, be a clear message, not just to conservatives, but to swing voters in the middle as to what the Democratic Party has become today, because they are making threats, whether they are real or whether they're empty. And I do think that they are largely empty threats here, but they are playing with fire, because they're talking here about the very nature of the American constitutional order. They want to add Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. Frankly, they want to abolish the U.S. Senate, Rita. They think the U.S. Senate itself, the senior legislative chamber, they view it as a vestige of a white patriarchal colonial society because Wyoming has the same number of votes in the Senate as California, New York. Garbage. I mean, there are very good reasons why we have this current setup here. They want to pat the court, though. They're playing with fire, and I think the American people are frankly going to look at videos like that, and they're going to say, I don't know what the heck this guy's talking about, but I know I don't like it. Therefore, I'm voting for the other guy.
Let's hope so. Now, we've spoken about the exodus from New York by those alarmed by Zohran Mamdani's triumph there. The Mamdani refugees will be fleeing New York City, and among them will be, sadly, many Jews, Josh. But despite Mamdani's radical rhetoric and anti-Israel views, the exit polls, the CNN exit polls, showed that 1 in 3 Jews in New York City voted for him. Does that surprise you?
Well, two things to note here, Rita. One is that if you look at the exit poll that I saw, to be clear, that number is galling. But on the other hand, it actually was a slightly lower percentage of Jews for Mamdani than Protestants and Catholics in New York for Mamdani. So Cuomo actually beat Mamdani in New York City among Jews, Catholics, and Protestants. Mamdani just won people who have no religious affiliation, and he won that by like a shockingly high margin. He got like 70% of the religiously unaffiliated votes. Having said that, 1/3 of Jews voting for Mamdani is obviously 1/3 too many. And you look at some heavily Jewish precincts, such as the Upper West Side, and the Upper West Side went for Mamdani. Now, a lot of the more religious communities in Brooklyn and so forth went very heavily for Cuomo against Mamdani. Rita, the reality here is that the Jewish community in the United States is extremely politically divided between religiously observant and just culturally traditional Jews and deeply assimilated progressive left-wing reform Jews, et cetera. There, my old friend Ben Shapiro likes to refer to these Jews as ginos, as Jews in name only, and in comparison to rhinos, Republicans name only. There, they might be halakhically Jewish under Jewish law, that is to say. They might think that they enjoy a bagel and lox or watching Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm reruns, but there's nothing particularly Jewish about them there. And unfortunately, Rita, this is the story of the Jewish people going back thousands and thousands of years. The good news from a sheer demographic and political voting pattern perspective is that it is the more traditional and religious Jews that are actually marrying other Jews, unlike the left-wing Jews, who are having lots of Jewish children. So I think that the Jewish voting demographic in America, call it 10, 15, 20 years from now, is going to be considerably different looking than it is now. And I would argue considerably more right wing, which is a very good thing.
Josh Hammer, thank you for your time tonight.